Haidala Isis, Kalkajad Hinu Dihad Kilgakayang. I'm Erin Brillin, and I'm from the Haida and Cree Nations. Together with my husband, Andy Everson, we have dedicated ourselves to the revitalization and preservation of our cultures. But as each month passes, our communities along the coast lose precious elders. Every time an Indigenous elder passes, gone with them is a lifetime of wisdom that is lost to the coming generations. The Next Ancestors podcast features Indigenous elders and cultural knowledge keepers who have amassed a wealth of knowledge to share with us all. Indigenous wisdom is needed now more than ever to help us navigate in these uncertain times. And through this podcast series, each episode will serve to preserve this valuable wisdom to share with the world before it's too late. We're here today with Chief Kwakwaka'wakw, William Wasden Jr., and he is an incredible artist, obviously a chief, and one of the most sought after potlatch singers on the coast, as well as the most culturally knowledgeable person that I know. So we're really honored to have you here today and to have a good conversation about some really interesting things. So thanks for being here.
My traditional name is Hitlamas. My English name is William Wasden Jr. And I'm from the Alert Bay and Niquish Valley tribe.
I usually start off each interview with asking all of the guests, who were some of your main cultural teachers growing up, and what are some of the teachings that you always carry with you today? Big question, hey?
It is a big question. There's so many people that were so kind and generous with their information that there was just so many people that gave little pieces here and there and were always willing to help us along. Mm-hmm. But I think that the main cultural teachers would have to be Chief Hewakilis, Chief Tom Willie and his wife Malidit, Elsie Williams. They started a singing group in Alert Bay in, I would say, the early 90s. They saw where the singing was going and they really wanted to do something about it. So my dad moved them to Alert Bay because he was the band manager for their tribe, and it was too hard for them to get in and out of their little village at Hopetown called Hergums. And so he wanted them to be safe, and he wanted them to have a hospital access and the store. And so he moved them to Alert Bay and got them a place to stay. And in their wisdom, they had a vision of teaching young people. And their words were, "We will teach anybody and everybody as long as they're willing to respect it." So they set up this sessions just in their house. It was really beautiful. And pretty soon, most of us were encouraged to go. And so we did. And then it just grew and grew, and pretty soon there was a real force of singing coming back. And I could honestly say that because of the seed that those two planted, singing spread to all the tribes, and everybody was inspired again, and it started to really become powerful again.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. How old were you around then?
I would want to say around 19 years old. Mm-hmm. Yeah, around 19. My dad took me to go see them kind of on a private visit because the old man wanted to just to say hi and see who was interested. So I went, and it was it was a lot of history. And what I find out about life with our culture is that the old man said if the history is still intact, you can always compose again and you can always reconstruct ceremony, but you can't recreate the history. So it was most important that we always paid attention and we listened to the depth of where these things were coming from.
You also learned songs and stuff from, is it Mackenzie?
That's him.
Oh, that's him.
That's him, Mackenzie. Okay. Yeah, Chief Tom Willie. He was born at Mackenzie Sound, so.
Oh, that's why he's called. Okay,
he's called
I was thinking it was a different person.
Yeah, and his wife Elsie was she was so gifted. She used to transcribe too, and she was actually Chief Tom Patchwamus's daughter, so she was a princess too as well, and. They were just amazing. Oh, we actually ended up calling her Gaga, which is grandmother, because she was so kind to us and just always pushing us forward to learn and, revive our singing, the singing aspect of our culture.
But did you always know that you were going to have a chieftainship?
No. I remember going to potlatch when I was young, and I understood a little bit of what was going on, but I remember starting to dance and getting dances from people. And then my family really didn't participate after a certain period of time due to my grandfather's wisdom, how the potlatch had become very toxic and colonized. So we were removed at one point by my great-grandfather. And in time, we had heard what the things that they had owned and the privileges that they carried. So I thought it was kind of a shame to let those things go to waste. And so I talked to the older people in the family. And then pretty soon my grandmother, Putsa, and my granny Gika, who were the last living children of that old chief that were concerned about his standing, they basically discussed it and said if we were going to do it in a manner or following the traditions that our grandfather believed in, then we would continue on. So we had a meeting with our family and we said, yeah, we'll do our best to keep it pure and true and keep our family together. That was the most important thing. So we've done a pretty good job. You know, we're still standing together, and I think our grandfather would be proud of us. Yeah. There was a lot of different chieftainship names documented that went above this old chief, Kwakwaka'wakw. They called him Samuel Innes. And he was, his play potlatch name was Tlauxum, which is red cod. It came from a long line, right, direct descendant from the Thunderbird, Kwanutsila. And there was a lot documented about the chiefly names of that lineage. But my grandmother and her sister said that we didn't know those people, so not to go any further back. So we only went as far as the grandfather they knew. Yeah. The first real cultural activity or passion that I had was artwork. I was trained by Doug Cranmer when I was young. I was under his mentorship. He was a really nice, strict teacher. I loved the strictness. Like, he had rules about the artwork, and he was always going above and beyond to teach us the teachings behind it, that, you know, always have a story behind what you're doing. These sort of creatures and characters have this and that, and you have to have that included. And he was always concerned about the culture too. He's always telling me, you know, what I see today is really evolving fast, he said. And he was always reminding me to, you know, to do our best to keep it, what our ancestors left behind, to the best of our ability. Yeah. My mom brought me to him, and I was standing by the door, and he didn't want kids in his art class, and he was, no. And my mom was, please. So he ended up taking me in. Him and my mom had a good relationship, and I ended up in an adult art class at 12 years old. Oh, wow. And then I was drawing one night, and I spilt Indian ink, and it dripped in between the table, and it landed on my Auntie Dodo's painting. And Doug said, that's why I didn't want kids in my adult art class. And then Dodo said, she was my aunt, she said, it's okay, we shall just start again. So it kind of ironed it out, made it okay. But I really admired Doug. He was just good at everything he did, and he was just honest about things. You know, he told it like it was, and he was like, you know, they talk about Mungo being the slender thread. Doug was a slender thread coming from Mungo as well as others in our Hunt family and the Knox family. Doug definitely passed on what he was entrusted with by the artists before him. Yeah. And then I have to credit Don Yeomans as well. In grade 11 and 12, I ended up in his art class, and he saw what I was doing. And then he was really honest. He was honest with me too, and he just said, you know, you could learn something here, or you can continue to be sitting there pretending like school and artwork isn't that important. So he didn't say it like that, but he said it, interestingly enough. I had respect for him, I guess, because he was brutal honesty. Yeah, and he was a really good teacher too. He taught me how to be patient. He could see that I'm need things done right now, and you know, as fast as I can do it. And I'm effective in fast work, but he wanted me to slow down and, you know, make things worthwhile and quality, instead of being a Friday night artist trying to get something sold so I could have a good weekend. I think that's what he said.
He was my brother's first mentor as well. Yeah, and he has a really good method of, he always switches mediums, so he doesn't just stick to one medium. He'll go from one project and then switch mediums entirely, so that he's always keeping his skills really brushed up all the time, which is pretty cool.
Well, what I liked about his class is that he had structure to it, and we had to do 4 assignments. One was Kwakwaka'wakw, one was Nuchano, one was Haida, and one was Coast Salish. and you had to complete a project designing in those styles. And if anything, I learned to respect those art styles because, you know, you grow up doing your own and it's become second nature, but to do other art styles, you have to study and realize that there's something else really, really powerful going on that you're not really used to or aware of. Yeah. Especially the Coast Salish one, I really had to dig deep to understand the positive and negative their artwork is all about.
Is there any misconceptions about our culture that you feel like need to be sort of cleared up for people who have kind of misguided understandings of things?
Well, for me, the misguided understandings, a lot of it's coming from literature, where a lot of anthropologists, not from our people or not groomed or lived amongst our people, are writing their interpretations of what they saw or they are seeing, or recycling old information and just putting it in fancier words instead of coming to sit amongst the people and find out what's really going on. Yeah, I think about the colonization of our culture, and the old man Mackenzie told me that even with the singing, it became colonized, where our people were trying to compete with the songs and making more elaborate and more fancier, lengthy songs just to have something bigger and better than their fellow clansmen or their chiefs or whatever. So even in that arena, things were becoming very Western thought. And I think that we need to get back to the basics of what do we do for our community? How do we contribute? Everybody has a place. The ancestors all gathered each other together because they couldn't function unless they were whole as a unit. Yeah, and it's about, you know, unity in the community. I like to say that. Just those good old teachings, you know. Yeah. We're starting to work at that. I think for a while they've been asleep, and it's time now because the further we go into our history now, the more colonized our people are becoming. Some of our people are really hanging on to it, and I admire those people. And sometimes those people are crucified for trying to talk about the ways of old. Yeah.
Well, you know more songs than anybody I have ever heard of, and I don't even know how many songs. You probably don't even know how many songs that you know. It's like hundreds and hundreds, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, I was just lucky to have really good teachers, and singing wasn't really my gig. I could sing when I was a little boy, like I was in the choirs. I was a little drummer boy at 5 years old. But with the traditional singing, it was my dad that had the vision to bring me to those elders to go and see if I fit the bill, I guess. And it was interesting. He sang one song after a long, long night of talking, and I was kind of almost going to sleep, you know, not thinking that was important, what he was saying. But then you can say I'm crazy or not, but there's always this voice that comes and talks to me sometimes. And it kind of gives me some insight into what's going on, but I hear it loud and clear. And the voice said, he's testing you to see if you're a worthy student. Yeah. And that's when I went, oh, yeah, okay, I get it. He's been talking and giving me history for a long time here. And I was thinking, well, where's the song I heard we're coming to sing? So he finally sang a song, and he said, oh, this is from another nation, different wording, different style of beating. And if you could learn this, you could learn anything. What it turned out, it was one of the Tlingit songs from our Hunt family that was brought down with Anislaga. And I know he knew my mom's family because he was connecting to that genealogy with her, saying we were connected like 8 generations back to him. So I think he was pretty strategic in picking that song because we come from that story as well. And so I recorded him, and then I went home and listened to it when I went to sleep. And then I sang it to him the next day, and you could tell he was quite happy that there was a student for him to start. So, but then lots of others came, and there's lots of beautiful singers. The group just kept expanding, and I honestly can say that those sessions is what inspired the singing in Alert Bay, and then it ripple affected out to the other tribes.
And you have worked with other tribes too to help compose new songs. Like, I don't know, do you know how many songs you've composed?
No.
Just tons.
Just a lot, yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess that's a beautiful thing to be able to help people do that, because my uncle Tom Dawson in Kinkham, he said, son, you keep on making new songs, because that's a part of our culture. Every new initiate used to have their own new songs. He said, if we keep dancing to the old people's songs, nothing will change, and only the faces will change, and our culture will become very stagnant. And when you compose, you have to look at the spirit of that person and be able to make a song with the poetic and the metaphoric translations of the wording to reflect that person's character and how they fit within that society. So it's an art, you have to
Totally, yeah.
be able to connect those things. And he also said, my Uncle Tom, he said, none of us dance to the same beat and none of us have the same song. We all have our own spirit, our own individuality, and that we have to recognize that and honor that. And through the songs, that's where the wording and how the energy or the spirit of the song comes from.
Cool. It's interesting because like in my tribe, all of our secret society songs were lost and none of them carried over past colonization. And so it's been more of a struggle to compose new songs because we don't necessarily have a lot of old songs to base those things off of. When I think about your ability to help other tribes like outside of your own to compose new songs, is there certain things that you would advise people to do in order to help those songs come through?
Everything comes from the land. Everything that a nation comes from where they're situated in this world. Even the language develops according to the way the land is. So if I was to give any advice, is to start those sacred rituals, however it looked, like the fasting, the spiritual bathing, the purification, and send the young people back to the land, and the land will speak to them. These things will come back to them. As First Nations people, we know that our ancestors are still here. Sometimes they appear through the animals, sometimes they appear through spirit, but those things are still there, and that's a real strong part of who we are. And our ceremonies is that connection to spirit, including ours. So I always tell people, if you get a bunch of young people willing to go to the forest, the land and the ancestors will speak to them, and these things will start to come back, because that's where they came from to begin with.
Yeah.
It's not a hard procedure to do. It just takes commitment, and it takes sincerity towards what you want to do for your people.
Do you see songs structured differently based on what tribes there are? Like, I'm not that familiar with how songs are composed, or like how you break them down into sections. Or do you think that each tribe had their own sort of way of building a song? When
I listen to some of the old stuff, there's definitely styles and flavors going on with the different songs. At one point, I was told that older people like to say about the Kwakwaka'wakw, that the Kwakwaka'wakw like to switch their beats up a lot. Yeah, that they were always having beat changes in their songs. It wasn't necessarily the tunes and stuff, it was the beating. But if I listen to the Awikino people, their rhythms are pretty steady, but their choruses are really melodious and beautiful. So I'm almost thinking their location with the Balakulas close by and the interior people not far, that their music was being influenced by their neighbors too, by, they're potlatching together and stuff. So, and with our tribe, with the old songs that we do have from our own people, they're really quite low and haunting, and especially like winter dance songs, they're slower and more haunting. That's all I can say is, But yeah, definitely you can somewhat pick out different styles and stuff like that. With the Hiltzok people, with the Dlualacha songs, the peace dances, we call them, there's just a lot of steady beats. If you go to the week, they've got a lot of changing beats in their Dlualacha songs. So, yeah, and I think that the Kwakwaka'wakw have both steady beaters and changing beats, but I think in later times our composers were really working with the changing beats. And I think that probably came with, those are fancier, with that Western thinking.
Getting really complicated.
Yeah, with that new age way of thinking. That's fancier than a steady beater. So yeah. That's what I think anyway.
Yeah. Is there certain parts of the potlatch tradition that you think can't ever evolve or change from the way it's kind of set right now?
My only comment on that is that why would we change what we know our ancestors did? If our ancestors were doing it, who are we to change that? The only time I think we need to evolve is when we don't really fully understand anymore, or don't have the tools or the framework of what the ancestors did, because they did it for a reason, and if they were doing it for thousands of years, they knew why they were doing it. So I believe there's room for evolution, but I don't believe in doing that when we know what our ancestors were doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Evolve when you have to, but when the framework is already laid down for you, why would you undermine your ancestors?
For people that maybe don't understand prerogatives and the sort of significance of prerogatives in the potlatch system, could you explain it to people? Because I think up and down the coast, you guys are really lucky that your whole system of showing your prerogatives has been so well documented and well maintained throughout history. But you go up the coast a bit and like those prerogatives have been lost, and there's a lot of people who don't actually really understand what it means to have prerogatives and show them. And so can you kind of give a background on that for people who might not understand them?
Well, with our culture, and especially the potlatch, we have lots of ceremonies, but the main one that I guess we're discussing is the potlatch. We're showing our history through song and dance and ceremony and sharing it with the other people so that they'll understand who we are. And in doing so, we pay them to say thank you for witnessing, and them accepting their gifts and whatever we give to them is their way of saying, I approve, and I'm going to, this is valid to me, and they're going to go and continue to tell the story of what they saw. And I guess that's why, like, sometimes we can ask other neighboring tribes about, do you remember anything our family had? Or, you know, do you remember anything about this family? And some of them can tell you because they were there when the ancestors were doing things. And because we don't have a written tradition until later in time, this is what our people did to document and record stuff. It's an interesting question because we dance up until a certain point now, and we tell a story to a certain point. But what are the things our people are doing now that are ceremony worthy or dance constructing and composing worthy? Because we've got a lot of people out there that I see as heroes, and we need to somehow recognize them through ceremony and through our potlatch system, especially the older people. Like I'm thinking about Mungo Martin, Data, Billy Sunday Willie, Uncle Tommy, Washlawiti, Tommy Hunt. These guys were all chiefs, no disrespect. I'm just trying to think. Mackenzie. All these people that, Chief Johnny Hunt, all these people that recorded these powerful, beautiful songs and talked about the ceremonies, these things are still being accessed as resources, and the things that they've recorded and talked about are being lifted up again. There's certain ceremonies that were asleep, and unless they had done that, they would have just faded away like everything else, right? One of my uncles, Basil Lambers, and I really learned a lot from him, and he said the same thing about those kind of people. What are we going to do to recognize them so that their efforts won't be forgotten? Like, you know, do we make a monument for them? Do we carve a totem poles to represent them? Or maybe there's something that we can do in the ceremonies to always remember those singers that hung on and that we're still singing because of them.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah, no, because one time I was having a conversation with somebody in Haida Gwaii, and I was saying how sad it is that we don't have any record of our prerogatives, like in the secret societies, we don't have songs and all that stuff. And this person said, like, it's not a big deal because we can just make up new ones, is almost antithetical to the whole potlatch system where you're really only showing what is yours to show, right? Like you can't just, you know, make stuff up or like, oh, you like something, so you're just going to go show it. Like it really has to be connected to your origins and your lineage and all of those things. So when I think about my daughter now who's trying to learn the language, and she composed a song that was used in Andy's potlatch, you know, again, she's looking at our lineage and talking about our crests and things like that and trying to do it in an authentic way. So it's a little bit trickier than just being creative and, you know, making a song, and, you know, you really have to do the connecting the dots to your ancestry.
Well, it's just like what I was saying, what Doug had to say. And Doug was a chief as well. He was very, very part of the potlatch system. His name's in the potlatch ledgers, and his name was Kwakwaka'wakw. I have to keep on recognizing them as chiefs because it's almost disrespectful just to say Doug Cranmer. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah, but Chief Douglas Cranmer, he, just like what he said about the artwork, you always have a story with it. Like it's nothing if it's just a piece of design on a paper with no story to it. It's disconnected. So it's just like what you're talking about. When we compose songs, connect it to whatever it is your family's story is and whatever you're trying to present. Thinking about the Sliammon people, I told them, you got a guy called Larry Louie who was the first professional soccer player who played for the Whitecaps, who was from the Sliam, I think it was a Sliam and Brave, I'm not too sure. But I said, you need to do something in the culture to recognize that man. Because we weren't warring or we weren't fighting supernatural beings or animals in the wild, but he was a modern day warrior and was able to compete at the highest level. So to me, he was a hero, and there should be like a song composed or something to commemorate that time in his family's history of this guy that was like super, he had special abilities. Like to me, that's supernatural qualities or power,
That'd be a really cool way though to like keep the culture evolving by adding significant people into the ceremonies somehow.
Well, it's even
whether people are composing songs for them or about them or something like that.
Yeah, well, it's like the Haidas with their powerhouse basketball today. They should have, because up north basketball is the modern day warfare, right? Down south it's the soccer. So the Haidas have been dominating for so long. There should be something composed or choreographed dance-wise to celebrate that powerhouse of successes of the Haida people.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Modern day heroes.
Modern day warriors and heroes, yeah.
Yeah, totally. When you think about the responsibilities of being a chief, what do you think is the key things about being a good chief?
I asked 2 chiefs that I just admired with all my heart, and they're both passed now, so I'm going to name them. It was Chief Heislamas, Tom, and we call him TK, Tom Henderson, and the other one was Chief Helagilis, Spruce Wamas. And I called him Osai, which is an old word for father, because these guys were out, again, more people with teachings willing to pass it to us and tell us little bits about this and that. But I asked them at separate times what they were taught, because I just admired how they loved their people and how they moved amongst the people and what they did for ceremony and how they supported others. And they both had, at different occasions, said the same thing. They said their father or their grandfather, to be a chief, your only mandate is to look after your people. But deeper than that, the people is your children. You have to be able to teach them who they are and where they come from, so that they'll have a strong foundation and an understanding of who they are, so that when they go out in this big world, that they'll have a chance and that they can walk with their head up and know that they come from something and they belong somewhere. Yeah, and I thought, imagine if we all thought that way. How beautiful. And then to contribute to your people. Always be doing something to help enhance or uplift your people and role model something that the younger generation will want to be a part of.
That's the one thing I keep hearing from all the chiefs and matriarchs that I've interviewed, is that you're putting yourself in a position of service more than in a position of power. Like that's the emphasis is on how are you going to serve versus, who are you going to have your head above, sort of thing.
Well, my Auntie Mary used to say, if you're really a chief, you'll be the poorest person in the village. Like you'll be, supplying and giving to your people, where they're more of the priority than yourself, right?
Yeah. So there's chatter about people who disagree with people getting chieftainships if it comes from the mother's side. How do you combat those types of chatters?
I was always taught that we don't, how do you say it? If you roll in the mud with pigs, you're a pig too. That's what one of my uncles said. He's a chief. He's a chief. And so you do what you got to do in the big house. That's where things are valid, and that's where you make your statements about what you're doing and where you're coming from. Yeah. And there's enough history amongst our people of people coming from their mother's lineage.
Yeah, totally.
I can go on and
generations and generations.
I can go on and name 10 different ones right now. But
I'm not just talking about you personally, but there's so many examples of it.
What do you do when there's only a daughter born into your family, and they come from long lines of chieftainships? The husband's family is going to marry them to have this union, and then when they have children, they're going to be passed down to the mother's lineage, and it's happened over and over amongst our people. What I realize in amongst our people is that some of our people, again, are not about that unity. They're not about that wanting to contribute and stuff. Some of our people have bought into the colonized way of thinking. And it's sad. It's not everybody, but there's some of them out there. There's always going to be those people out there. One of my teachers from Bella Bella, I want to call him Father, Bill Gladstone. He said there's always going to be a small percentage that's got something to say about everything that people do.
Yeah.
And it's that small percentage that doesn't do anything for anybody. And he didn't say it that nicely, but that's what we realize, is that's how it works. There's always going to be these naysayers, and the people that are contributing just got to keep moving forward,
It's one of the most disappointing aspects of being culturally involved for me, is when there's just so much negativity. And it's also something that non-Indigenous people don't have any idea of. Like, they look at people who are upholding culture and they think, oh, it must be so wonderful and you must be so celebrated in your community. Little do they know how much actual attack you get and how much negativity happens around every potlatch. Like, there's always this little undercurrent of negativity and chatter that goes on with every cultural event. And for me, I find it really disheartening, because it feels like there's so much time invested. You put in your heart and soul into something, and then there's still people who will criticize no matter what.
Well, they're always going to be there. And the narrative that has to change is, why do we put so much energy on those kind of people when there's a whole bunch of people that are grateful, learning, being brought in, being a part of, and there's a whole multitude of people that are just really supportive and happy with, just being a part of something. Yeah. So we have to start putting our energy to saying, this is where we need to what we need to recognize, and these are the kind of people that we need to surround ourselves with. And a lot of time, those negative Nancys, they never come, or they don't contribute anyway. Why give them any kind of value or weight on what they have to say?
100%, yeah.
But I know why people do. They want 100% peace, love, and granola, but it's never going to happen. No. And that comes with teachings. There's a saying, we can only look after our own house. Don't worry about what that clan's doing over there. That's their business. If they evolve it, they have to meet their ancestors. We have to meet ours. So, what the neighbors are doing is none of our business. We just go there if we respect them and show them our support by just being there. I have learned that I have respect for people, but if people aren't going to give it back to me or my family in what we do, then I don't have to invest my time in them either. And it's a sad state of thinking like that, but it's also like, well, you can't just be constantly a doormat by going to contribute, and then certain people just say, oh no, we're not going to help him out or whatever. I've actually taken a list of who is supportive at our potlatch, and those people, I'll look you in the eye, I'll be loyal to you to the end of time, because you've shown your love and support to my family. No, it's not me, it's my family. Yeah. And so I will be loyal to those families as best to my ability.
Well, the whole system is based on reciprocity. So if you're not getting, if you're giving and not getting back, then it's like, okay, move on.
Yeah, exactly. So real wonderful people out there that do follow all the gatherings, and they just come and mind their own. And they always say, we've come to hear your story, and it's just like the legend telling too. Like, they have the Nuyumts, the people that are the heads of the clans. They're the storytellers. They own the story. They can tell it any way they want. It's not up for other people to go and challenge them and say, no, that's not how I heard it. If you're not from that clan and you don't, especially if you're not the story keeper, it's none of your business. Yeah. Uncle Dick, he used to say, and I heard over and over from his daughters, they would say when they were doing something they didn't quite understand, he would always say, I guess that's how they do it, where they come from. Like,
it's just different.
That's them. Like, don't go get it all.
Don't go be all finger wagging.
And get all bent out because it's not what you think or what you believe.
Yeah. What do you think the best way to address doing things that are culturally inappropriate, like either claiming things that they shouldn't be or things like that? Do you think there's like a healthy way to go about addressing those things?
The healthy way in our culture is, if you disagree with something that somebody's done, or you're making the same claim, you have 10 months. 10 is perfect in our culture. And I seen it done when I was younger. It was over a hamatsa. And the family hamatsa, this young man, and there was chatter about it. So within 10 months, another relative had a potlatch. So they cut in and bought time, and he danced again, and they gave more money away. And so it was, they said they called it locking it up.
So
that
two
other
people were claiming the same
they
amateur,
were
or-
chattering about it, but they
But
never
not-
did anything about it. So
Yeah.
they called it, it's locked up now. So that other family had to just say, you know, shut up. you've been shut up. And the proof of our culture is in the stories and the history. You should always be telling your stories of your dances. You go to some potlatches and there's all these dances going by and these names going by that we've kind of trying to figure out. And it's like, how did that connect to your family and where did you get it? For some people, it's become a show. But for some people, they tell you their history. How did that dance get to those people? They married so-and-so to get it. Or it's from their history, from their beginnings. And everybody should be telling their stories of where these dances came from and how they got them.
It's becoming more prevalent now in the last few years. Hey,
It's
where
coming to life, yeah.
People are being very clear about it. But one thing that I like about your guys' system is the way that you guys do the chief meetings before the potlatch.
For me, it's like you should only be really telling those visiting chiefs what the agenda looks like. Because if you're really coming from a place of just your own solidarity and your own identity, you shouldn't be touching anything of theirs anyway. You know what I mean? If you're really coming from a place of your true history, basically you're just going to tell them this is the agenda, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
And that hashing out stuff would have been amongst the clan people and the elders and the family and stuff like that prior to that chiefs meeting. It should have been sorted out amongst your own family and stuff.
So traditionally, how would our people have worked out things where there was not an agreement on whether it be prerogatives or things like that?
I go back to, I love our uncle, Paul Willie said, I respect you enough to disagree, but still respect you afterwards. You know what I mean? Like, we can agree to disagree. And I think our people should come to that place again, because I know that older people used to be like that. I hear stories of, people having disputes and serious quarreling, and then one of them invites them in for tea, and then they sit down and, well, let's talk about it and figure it out, because it's obviously not working. When you come from a village, a small village, you need harmony, and you need ways to resolve things in order for you. In the olden days when there was war and that sort of stuff, and you weren't going to survive if you didn't, have unity amongst your tribes people. What I was taught amongst our village with that Kwakwaka'wakw business is that, you were living in their community houses, and of course the chatter was there between the older people, or if it was concerning young people, they would talk at a family level because the extended families are living together. And then those leaders, because they have the Kwakwaka'wakw across the street from the heads of those clans, they go out, and if there's issues that need to be discussed, they discuss it at the level of the heads of the families, just them now. So they've moved from family level to heads of the family. And then after that level, it goes to the heads of the clans if it needs to go that much further. So we had 4 clans in the end. Originally we had 10 Numpies people. So in the end, it would have been 4 people meeting and talking about things. And then finally to the hereditary business, they would bring it to the forest. And there was a platform behind, it's actually behind our house up where me and my Uncle Bio's house is. My Uncle Bio's real name's Arthur. That my grandmother said that's where they used to go to solidify things, and like not just internal politics, but if the winter dance was going to go on, the hereditaries, the heads of the clans went up there to do their final decision making. And when they came out and announced down from the forest to the people, it was set in stone now that this is what the tribe is going to do now together. So there was different levels of meeting about issues and stuff, and sometimes it didn't have to go very far. I imagine most issues were just dealt with at a family level. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
In all communities up and down the coast, there's like a big push to get language revitalization happening, and I know that you're a part of doing a lot of work in Alert Bay. So do you want to talk about some of the stuff that you're doing up there right now?
Yeah, we're having cultural nights, and 3/4 of it for 2 hours is language, and yeah, it's really inspiring. I always had my own little stigmas with our language because we went through a lot of negativity with it growing up.
Yeah.
And our parents and our grandparents had negative tones with it. And so to me, I really believe that our people should have a big gathering where we do ceremony to cleanse it and release it and say, that's the past and we're going to make our language pure and true and inviting to our young people. And
That's a really good idea.
well, and that the young people know it's your language. We want you to learn it in a fun, loving way now, and we want you to be excited about it. The revitalization back home has been amazing. I just take my hats off to all the people that have been willing to go and sit in those sessions. Like I look at the young people at Hada. We were at a family dinner, and they always ask my mom to pray, and my mom says, get one of the younger people to pray. And I looked at my nephew, Denzel Wilson, and he's at Hada. And I said, well, why don't you pray, Denzi? You've been learning the language. And he, no hesitation, and this is, he's been raised, to be comfortable and confident in who he is. But he just prayed in our language, and I know a few of our older people in our family had tears in their eyes, and I was just like, I didn't expect him to be that eloquent or elaborate in what he said. But and it was powerful. And for me, it was just like the language is going to be like the singing now. There's a seed that's been planted, and it's starting to ripple effect, and it's going to explode where our people are just going to be loving that language, and it's coming back big time. But there's certain people, and I have to praise our women. My teacher was Pauline Alfred back in the day, and she was a really effective teacher. Like everything Pauline taught me, I still remember today. Like she was about repetition too, and it was always the ladies that were worried about the language. And now I went and sat in a meeting about 2 weekends ago, and they said, it's always the women and the children. It was women that said this, and they go, what about our men? It's time to bring our men in. So they had like about 20 men from different villages sitting in there, and the language just started rolling. And there was a couple of my uncles sitting there that I didn't know could speak the language. And I got really teary-eyed. I was like, I did not know. And it's just because they were in an arena where they felt comfortable because everybody else was speaking it. It was like, go for it. So yeah, there's a lot of
like they were sort of like silent speakers?
Silent speakers, but they could speak it if they chose to. You got like Pee-wee. Pee-wee's been a centurion for the language for, I think, longer than anybody. And I just take my hat off to her, and I'll always support whatever she's doing. My niece, Gloria Hunt, she's a little centurion out there going for it with her language. There's so many. Thomas Wamas Jr. I'm just thinking different villages. And then we got the elders like my uncle Chief Dick Dawson, Auntie Margaret Wilson. These people are really dedicated. Like they're always out at Hada with the kids and stuff. And we wouldn't be anywhere without those dedicated people. So Uncle Bobby Joe, of course, Chief Kwakwaka'wakw. You know they care. They actually care about our young people and where our culture is going to be headed if we don't have no language. Talk about Basil too. He had his own position, Uncle Basil. Yeah, he had his own position among the Mantagila. But I sat with him a few times, and the things he said were so profound. He said, you know what, son? If you are from what they call Kwakwaka'wakw today, you're a descendant of a first ancestor that survived the Great Flood. And you know who chose those people to survive? It was the Creator. Because those people were following the ancient traditions and weren't breaking away, so they were chosen to be spared. If you can trace your ancestry to a first ancestor, and if you're still standing with Kwakwaka'wakw blood in you, you're a chosen people. You're part of the chosen people. We're all descendants of something. And he goes, nobody can say you come from nothing. Because we all come from a story of a first ancestor if you're still here. And I thought, wow, what a way to think about it. And he says, our people have to get over that. There's a hierarchy. It was actually a social order for our clans and tribes, but with the clan systems, it was about birthright. And we believe that the Creator sends us into this world in our families when we're chosen to come. That's why the oldest male and female were really built up, because we believe the Creator chose them to be the oldest and to be the respected ones in our family. Everybody's respected, everybody has a place, but we really cherish the oldest, right? And it's the same with the clans. In later times with the colonization, it started to shift. But amongst our Numidis people, the sea monster people came back. Guatemalalis, Namukustolis was his name before Guatemalalis, but he came back on the sea monster first and was put back at the mouth of the river. He was the first one back, so he's first in order, that clan. Then they say there was a lot of clans at that time, but next came the Gigilgum. So upriver, that Steelhead and the Thunderbird came together, built the first house. They were the second back after the flood, so they were second in order. And then and so on. Sea Sinclair people migrated from the south, coming this way, joined later, so that's why they were third. There was 10, but I'm just saying what's gone on now. And then the Ninilk people were their own sovereign people at one time. They didn't join until 1830. They were upriver as their own separate tribe. And then after the epidemics and all that sort of stuff, because of their numbers, they thought it was just better to amalgamate now. So in 1830, they moved down and moved with the rest of the Numgis. And that's why Ninilk are the fourth clan. It doesn't mean they're higher or lower than the first. It's just the order that the Creator chose those people to come back and repopulate the land again. Do you know what I mean? So if we start to think in this manner, that, oh, this ranking, we're better, and all that stuff that's so colonized thinking will start to wash away, and our people will start to realize that everybody is just one people, and we all have something to offer, and we all come from something. You know, we belong to something. Imagine if our people all thought like that. What a wonderful world that would be.
Yeah. Yeah, I always just think there's like 8 billion people on the planet, and in our tribes there's only a few thousand maybe, right? And like, how important is it to keep those distinct cultures alive into the future?
Yeah, and I always think about Geronimo and them on that train. If you've seen that movie, and there are two, one was a turncoat and one wasn't, and the brave warrior was yelling at him, you were a traitor, you were against us. And Geronimo said, we're so few now, why fight amongst each other? You know, just let it be now.
Yeah.
Like try to band together here.
Yeah.
Everybody watch Geronimo. You want to know about teachers? The best teachers I had was my parents and my grandparents. There was a time when a family came to try to ask me to sing right after the day after my grandfather's funeral. And they asked me in the funeral to please come to the big house. And I was really offended. Like, I just buried my grandpa here. I don't want to sing for anybody or anything. And I looked at my grandmother and I said, well, what do you think, Nan? And she goes, if they need your help, you need to help them. And that was it. It's just like, if people have asked you to help them, you go and help them. That's what their teachings were. So I always looked at things differently, you know, just be good. And sometimes you don't want to do things, but your spirit says, well, why not? You know, you might change somebody's life, or you might change your own, you know.
I always feel like it must be so exhausting for you though, because you're pulled at all times in all directions. Like, you're probably the most sought after person for all these things, the cultural teachings, the songs and singing and all that stuff. It must be really exhausting to like find that well of energy to constantly be giving.
It does when there's politics involved.
Right.
And what I've done now is I realized I can share what I know with the teachings, with our people, but I don't have to be there for the decision making. I've told some of my relatives now, I'll just look at your program and tell you this is pretty much what I've been taught, and what I understand is how you choose and how you do your order to things. But when Willie Harris died, our head chief of the Numgis, our grandfather Ned Harris was the oldest, but the elders in the family, and this was told to me by my people, the elders chose his next brother because he was more sensible, and he wasn't, I guess our grandfather was an alcoholic too, so they skipped him and went to Chief Joseph Harris and chose the younger brother to lead the tribe. And we never ever really knew why, but eventually the story came out that it was his alcoholism. So to me, that told me that the elders in that family, who had basically upheld that, you know, that family's standings and positions prior, that they were able to look and with their wisdom choose an appropriate person. So today our people aren't groomed the way they were with the birthright system. So to me, I'm just telling our elders in those families now, it's time for you to step up, and here's the rules. And if you can take it or leave it, it's okay. But it's really up to the members of that family, the elderly people that they do have, to remember that they're making decisions on behalf of the next generations and the reputation of their family. So choose wisely. Gloria Webster, she had some awesome things to say. She said, our culture is about birthright and inheritance. It's not a democracy for the young people. And that's truly where we're swaying. It's because if you get enough people on your side to yell and argue about getting what you want, sometimes you will now. It's time to give our elders their due respect and to put some responsibility and, you know, decision making back on them. Like, they've been around longer than us, and pretty soon, that's what I always say, our turn will come one day. Allow the elders that we do have today to have their due respect, you know. Well, what it interests me though, like, why do other people want to have say in what other people are doing when they're not connected to them, or, you know what I mean? They're not from the same house or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like some people start telling stories about what they think and not what they've witnessed. If you don't go, you won't know.
Yeah.
Right? You don't sit out there and talk about it. Come in and see for yourself. It goes back to like the healing of our people. We've got a lot of trauma amongst our people, and still going on today. But there's some people that are working on themselves, and they're seeing the bigger picture about what it is to be culturally healthy, you know?
Yeah.
And culturally contributing and culturally helping. So that's what we're going to start working on with our cultural nights. It was my aunt Yvonne Gessinghouse. She said, well, what about the teachings? We want to get into that. I said, we probably should have started with that. You know what I mean? Like lay down the beautiful foundation of our morals and our values and our teachings with our young people. Because that will even set a precedent of how the behavior and the conduct goes just with the language learning, you know, if there's guidelines set down to, and they're not harsh or anything, it's just mostly about respect and honor, integrity.
Well, that's one thing that I always notice is that the more culturally involved and culturally connected a person is the more aware of their place that they are. You know what I mean? Like they don't step out of line in the sense that they're not like speaking on behalf of other people that they shouldn't, or, you know, it's like they're always cognizant of where they belong in the whole system. And that the less culturally connected they are is when you see people who are just, you know, like no place, no standing in, yet they have no problem with piping off about it.
Well, that's another thing that you're touching on is the behavior of people. The nobility I seen in my day, they weren't doing that. And they weren't doing that lateral violencing people.
Yeah.
Those noble people were always trying to contribute or help. In my day, like my Auntie Barb, I used to Celeste, my Auntie Barb Hunt, with my teaching, she would hear me say something. She would always call me aside to correct me. She would never do it in front of people. And she just said, I do this to you, nephew, because I love you and I don't want anybody to ever criticize you or make fun of you.
Yeah.
So in her beautiful, genuine way, she would take me away and then correct me and then let me go back again. But that public shaming and belittling, I really believe that came from residential school.
Yeah.
Because that's what they did to our poor people.
Thanks for doing that, though. I really appreciate it. I think it's really good for people to hear your perspective.
I know that my singing abilities and my artwork make people really, it's got medicine in it. And I know I've used it in a good way, and I'm proud of that. And I always say, I have to meet my ancestors one day. And I know they're going to welcome me with open arms. Like, I haven't used it or abused it to take anything from anybody.
Do you consciously feel that your ancestors are working through you?
I've seen a lot of things that you can't explain. I've heard, and even the animals, the way they perform and do things that are out of character for them, just for us to witness, it brings me into check to saying that spiritual realm of our people is real. Yeah. And all that we do in that big house, if we don't really believe in that, why bother? You know, if it's not connected. And I guess that's why, like, whenever we have our celebrations, our potlatches and stuff, we're always doing our best to keep it connected, you know, in a sacred way. If we don't continue to practice that spirituality, even if it's just one person for the family, then all of that won't really mean anything. You know what I mean? My way of thinking, or what I pass on to people, is if your history and your traditions are laying asleep, it's your right to go and pick it up. Nobody can tell you you can't. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like we're talking about, your family's business, your family business, and if your culture and your traditions are sleeping and dormant, you have a right to go and awaken it and pick it up again. And if you don't, who's going to? Yeah. You know what I mean? And the most powerful thing you could do is to get your whole family on board. It's not easy in this day and age, but you got to bring as much of your family along with you and bring that piece of being, you know, unified and oneness together. Yeah, it's not easy though. There's so much different people's different thought patterns and Egos, ego's real harsh.
That was good.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for doing it.